AI in Action is brought to you by Aldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Our host brings you the leading minds in AI, sharing their story, their success, and their advice. Focusing on fast-tracking you to the top, AI in Action cuts through the hype to help you kickstart your data science career. To listen to the latest AI in Action podcast, head over to www.aldus.com/podcast or subscribe via iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Podcasts.
You're listening to AI in Action. I'm your host, JP Valentine. Our guest today is Manny Akintayo. Manny is the co-founder and CTO at Gentem. Manny, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad you have me here.
Excellent. So Manny, let's start with yourself. Can you give a brief overview of your background, where you got started in technology, walk us through your journey, and take us up to just before you founded Gentem?
So I'm Manny, co-founder CTO at Gentem. My career started in the finance sector with JP Morgan Chase. I worked as an engineer, building backend systems for the bank. Graduated from Penn State with an electrical engineering degree. Shortly after that, got my master's and then moved on to the bank. One of the projects that I like to highlight when I talk about my background is the project we worked with the credit card industry, as they were migrating from credit cards without the chip and pin that you guys know and we all use today to the credit cards with the chip and pin. My team at the time was responsible for building some of the technologies to support that type of credit card. So spent some time there, left the bank for consulting. So I joined Accenture as an engineering manager. And that was also really my first introduction to the healthcare industry. So at Accenture, I worked with their big healthcare Fortune 500 clients to solve various problems. The one client I worked with at the time was Blue Cross Blue Shields. And I led the team in Accenture that built a claims and benefit management platform to support claims processing and benefit enrollment for their members, so for Blue Cross Blue Shield members. After my time at Accenture, obviously being entrepreneurial, I wanted to get some experience in the startup world. Knew that at some point I would want to start my own business. Wanted to learn about how to build a business from the ground up, and also the technology challenges that you face, because it's very different from working at a large corporation. So I joined as one of the early engineers, a startup called OfferUp, and some people are familiar with OfferUp, others not. But it's at the time was a mobile marketplace, so similar to Craigslist. And the innovation was they were basically a Craigslist mobile app. So joined as one of the early engineers there, but just happened to join at a time when they had raised a decent chunk of money. So within the span of, I'd probably say a year and a half, they grew from a team of 50 plus to hundreds of employees. And one of the things I valued about the experience there was I was able to learn how to quickly scale a company, a startup, as well as some of the technology challenges that you face while doing that. So, towards the end of my time there, I wanted to start working with data at scale. I joined the monetization team because they were working to introduce ads into the platform. And my interest in ads and data led me to Facebook, where I joined Facebook video ads team. So this is still way back when video ads was a very small portion of Facebook's revenue, and it was a small team, almost like a startup within Facebook, responsible for increasing the revenue, Facebook's revenue, by running ads on videos. And it was your classical big data problem, right? There's a lot of data about videos, a lot of video content, but we're trying to figure out how to effectively run ads. You put the ads in front of the video, nobody watches the video. You put the ads at the end of the video, and no one watches the ad. So, we put the ad in the middle of the video. And mid-roll video ads was born. It became profitable and another revenue stream for Facebook, and how Facebook could make money from videos. Towards the end of my time there, we were able to grow that revenue stream to about $1 billion. So, it was at that point as I was getting to the tail end of my time at Facebook, I started to consider different options, what I wanted to do next. Started leaning towards entrepreneurship. Coincidentally, my co-founder, Fisayo, at the time, was also in that part of his life where he was thinking about his next gig. He had just recently quit his company. It was a private equity shop he was working at. I've known him for a very long time, my co-founder, for a very long time now, and he was also incubating this idea coincidentally, which is Gentem today. During that time, we had reached out, we discussed, he pitched the idea to me. Right timing. Also was considering leaving at the time as well. So, I discussed with some family members that were in the industry. I remember from my time in Accenture and my experience with healthcare, then I knew there was something there, right? And so he quit his job a couple months prior to I did. I quit my job shortly after, and this is around May 2019. And Gentem, our company, was born, created shortly after.
Excellent. Well, listen, I appreciate that overview. It's good to learn about how at each point the decision making behind your moves and what it's all now led to here at Gentem. So, Manny, we appreciate that background on yourself and great segue into Gentem. So, from the top, can you explain Gentem, who you are as a business, the space and the industry which you're operating, and then the mission for the company overall?
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot for having me here and the question. So, Gentem, we're a Silicon Valley-based fintech startup, and we're building a SaaS platform to power the future of reimbursements for private medical practices. In terms of the space we're involved in, it's the revenue cycle process, so billing and specifically payments. But there are a few things we're doing very differently that I'm going to touch on shortly here. But our mission is very simple. We want to accelerate and increase reimbursements so private practices never have to worry about revenue again and can really just focus on their patients. Now, approach, as I'd mentioned, is a major shift from the status quo. We put the user experience at the core of what we do, and we try to elevate the quality of the user experience, while at the same time reduce the costs associated with the billing process for these private medical practices. So if you think about the private medical practice, right, unlike your big healthcare systems, these are your independent doctors really just trying to survive and thrive. And a big part of the time spent and time wasted is on billing and the revenue cycle. It's very, very time consuming, specifically because you have manual administrative tasks that have to occur in order to process a bill. So I like to think about, your average doctor average independent physician trying to run their business. They're seeing patients, which is how they get paid, which is what also they love doing. But hey, by the way, they have to spend, another 50% of their time, following up with payers on a phone call or, paperwork on documentation in order to just get paid, And so on the one end, you have rising time and administrative costs. And then in addition to that, you have a significant complexity, right? You have the process in which they have to create these claims only getting more and more complex. And then to top it all off, there's very little transparency into the process. You have your doctors most times, and I'm talking about your independent physicians, most times they have no clue how much they're going to get paid a month from now, how much they're going to get paid 2 months from now, because maybe denials go up, maybe rules change for a specific payer, and denials go up. Denials go up, and it results to an extension in which to the time they get paid. So maybe something, a bill that they submit, that should have been paid in 14 days ends up being paid in 30, 60, 90 days later. So what we've done here is simple. We've taken a process that is highly manual, very complex, very little transparency, and we've built an intelligent automated platform. We've used AI to automate the administrative task involved in this process, and then a very delightful platform to simplify the process completely. So the software platform, along with a solid operational staff, and then lastly, for every claim that we process in our system, we actually, if the doctor opts in, provide a cash advance. So we pay them up front for the claim, so they don't have to wait 30, 60, 90 days to get paid by the insurance company. And then whenever the insurance company reimburses, we take our cash advance back and charge them a fee. And so, this is really what we're doing here that's different. And, we're leveraging technology such as artificial intelligence, automation, to really streamline, accelerate, and increase the reimbursement process for these independent physicians.
Amazing. Thank you for that overview. An incredible mission in a space that absolutely needs this type of disruptive service. Thanks, Manny. So can you give us some insight into some of the big technological challenges that you're trying to solve by doing this, and how the use of data within healthcare payments is quite a unique challenge that you wouldn't have faced in maybe some of the other areas that you worked?
When I think about some of the problems we're trying to solve, I like to break it out into phases, and given the way our company has evolved. So when we first started, we're a fintech company. A big part of what we do is we actually offer cash advances to the private physicians that we work with. So for every claim that we process through our system, we offer a cash advance. So when we first started, the first problem we really had to solve was how do we effectively price a claim? How do we effectively price a bill that a doctor submits to us? The reason why that's important is because that bill that we price becomes the cash advance we make to the doctor, and then sometime in the future, the insurance company reimburses for that claim or that bill. And depending on the delta, so how much we advance versus how much the insurance company reimbursed, we make a fee on that bill. And so it's a classical data problem, right? How do you go ahead and determine how much a claim is worth? We started off with your standard regression model. We used that to get close to it. Over time, we acquired other data assets belonging to the practice, such as historical claim volumes, contractual obligations, so what the contract they have with that payer specifies they would make, and then we use that to further hone or improve the algorithm that we use to price the claim. Now, we're still working on that, and the reason I say that is because when I think of AI, it's really a journey. You don't ever really stop, right? And you're improving on models, and you're using that to the lessons learned or your model's learnings to get better at what you do. So early on, that was the first problem we had to solve. Moving on, as we started to build our own billing system, a big part of the problem we're now trying to solve is around intelligent automation. And I say intelligent automation because there's so many different ways you can automate a workflow or a process, right? And there's so many ways that process can be, the result of that process can affect the efficiency of the process. And so, you're naive. Automation is just automating specific routine task and then using that to, without the result of the automation, to run the process. While you have some automation or intelligent automation system that's able to learn from the result of the automation to improve the accuracy and automation coverage of the workflow you're trying to automate. So looking into some of the challenges, some of the challenges we're using, we have now, and what we're using data for. Intelligent automation is a big piece of it. This is at the cornerstone of the claim processing and reimbursement rate. So the more claims we're able to process correctly, the quicker the doctor gets paid, and the more they get paid. And so we need to build intelligent automation systems that are able to learn from itself, from the output, and improve the automation experience. Lastly, a big part of the revenue cycle is really around benefit verification. So understanding the extent at which a patient is covered for a procedure or a service, and then also being able to predict how much the patient is going to might pay for that service. It's very important because it ties into transparency, and I'm really just providing a transparent experience for a patient. I like to say, imagine a world where you're going to a doctor's office and you know how much you're going to pay for the services that a doctor wants to provide. How do we get there? We need to understand what goes into the services. We need to understand what the prices are. We need to understand the patient's benefits, what their insurance is going to pay for, in order to determine the patient's responsibility.
Completely agree, Manny. When you think of the complexity of healthcare within the US, one of the biggest areas is the unknown cost associated with treatment. And if anyone can make some improvements on that, the benefit on all sides is obvious. So it's great to see that you guys are trying to tackle that. I want to focus now on the journey that you've had thus far. You obviously founded the business officially in June of 2019. We're coming up on 2 years now. What are some of the learns that you've had looking at the last 2 years, particularly with the challenges of COVID? What are some of the biggest achievements that you're proud of so far?
I want to answer that question in two folds. I want to answer it from a business standpoint, and then also from an engineering product data standpoint. So from an engineering product data standpoint, you start off when trying to build an AI company, and the first thing you're going to realize is that there's not a lot of data when you first start, right? There isn't a lot of data. You're learning a lot as you go. Some hypotheses you started with are just flat out wrong. And then there are also challenges in acquiring the data. So in our case, specifically in healthcare, you have regulation challenges. HIPAA, you have to be HIPAA compliant. You have to obviously do it in a secure manner. The data acquisition of the data, unless you're paying for it or you're accessing anonymized, publicly accessible data sets, typically you have to build integrations with the practices to achieve or get the data you want. So in the early days, you need to think of very creative ways to solve your problem. So in our particular case, we were trying to figure out how do we actually accurately price a claim associated with a patient's visit or a bill that a doctor submits to the insurance company. And initially we started very scrappy. We built regression models using the data set of the doctor or the practice alone. But then over time, as we got more mature, we were able to access and build integrations to more sophisticated platforms to get better at making that decision. But I think a major lessons learned there was just always orienting for action right? Trying to contextualize your problem around two things. One is specifically, how do I solve the problem I have today? How do I do it in a scrappy manner because you're a startup? And then how do I make sure that the problem I'm solving or the way I solve that problem is scalable to the future state if I ever get there? So, from a business standpoint, one of the biggest lessons learned for us was just the ability to really be flexible and amiable to your environment, right? So we started the company Gentem literally 6-7 months before the pandemic. We've actually ran the company longer in the pandemic than we have in the pandemic. And so, there are a lot of assumptions you make prior to a pandemic that are literally not possible, right? So initially, when we started off, we would, as we're acquiring doctors, we would literally fly out to the practices and go through an onboarding process with them. We get their data literally by flying out, and I would go in there, access their EMR system if it's an on-premise platform, and literally download the data, right? All of this was possible pre-COVID, pre-pandemic. And then you fast forward to March of 2020, and you have to basically do all of this in a distributed setting, right? And as a startup, you adapt fast or you die, right? And one of the biggest lessons learned is really that, right? Really just being able to reestablish the team. And this kudos to our team and my co-founder as well, and everyone else, just really being able to be adaptable and come up with other creative ways to solve that problem beyond just flying out and meeting the person, the doctor in person. Now, obviously, we knew that wasn't going to scale, and we weren't doing that the plan wasn't to do that for every single organization, obviously, because that doesn't scale. But we would have probably not have done it as quick or switch our strategy as quick as we had to, if not for the pandemic. And then also just recruiting, right? How do you recruit engineers? How do you recruit talent? How do you recruit the best data scientist, the best software engineer to your company in a world where you're unable to even meet the person? How do you build camaraderie with that person? How do you build a culture, right? And so these were challenges that we weren't even concerned about prior to the pandemic, but became real issues during the pandemic, because all of a sudden I found myself having to pitch people Gentem over a phone call, and convince an engineer working at Google or Facebook or wherever it might be to quit their cushy job and take a chance with a startup in San Francisco.
Yeah, I can certainly relate to that myself, but I think it's great to hear you be so candid about the challenges, but also what's worked and the ability to pivot and how it's forced you to adapt. And I know from previous conversations with you and some of your colleagues that it is working and you guys are having success, and it's been very exciting. The last point you made there was about speaking to talent about Gentem and the journey. Talk us through that, because obviously it's very exciting to look ahead. The space that you're operating in is incredible, and it's hugely in demand. So give us some insight into your vision of the future of Gentem and what it would be like for engineers and scientists who come on board at this time.
Yeah, great question. Before I touch on that, I want to cover the last piece of your question, which was around just some of the success stories. I think a big success story for us is the progress we've seen in the telehealth space. So shortly after the pandemic, you had a lot of telehealth platforms that basically had to step up and provide other access to care for folks that desperately needed it but couldn't access it because of the pandemic. So you have telehealth platforms in the therapy space, for example, that have spun up, such as Cerebral, to really fill in that gap and void. And a big success story for us is we've been able to work with a few telehealth platforms to help solve that problem, basically, and provide another avenue for folks to get care during the pandemic, when sometimes, in some cases, in the early days, it was impossible to meet your physician in person. Yeah, so going into your follow-up question, right? Our vision for Gentem, I like to look at this like this, right? Our vision really is to revive the private medical practice and help providers remain independent. Okay, it's a very big vision. The reason it's a problem is because of how much waste, complexity, and issues are involved in the healthcare transaction space today, right? So you have situations where you have doctors, private practices just really giving up or burning out because they're unable to keep up with the billing process, the complexity involved in the billing process, the administrative overhead. You have folks spending 50-60% of their time on paperwork, all right, to get paid. And if you ask any doctor, they will tell you they would rather be seeing their patients. They would rather be providing care. So when I look at the future, it's very simple. We want to be able to enable these doctors. We want to make them thrive. We want to make them remain independent if they choose to. And the way we get there is by building infrastructure, by reinventing the infrastructure that drives the billing process, the revenue cycle process, which is where they're spending a lot of time on, so they don't have to worry about it anymore, and then they can focus on seeing patients and doing what they love to do.
Excellent, Manny. So final question from me then. You guys are obviously growing. You're looking to bring in people across the spectrum of skill sets within data. Can you help us visualize what the next 12 months look like for Gentem? What sort of career opportunities are there going to be, and the types of people that you're looking to interview?
I like to break the year into halves. So first 6 months and then the next 6 months. So the first 6 months is really about building the core team to support two aspects, which is insurance billing and patient billing. So this means hiring software engineers, hiring infrastructure engineers, and really being able to support the growth that's going to happen as a result of the capital we've raised, as well as the customers that we're adding, and some of the engineering challenges that come from doing that. Now, once that's done, the first half, and this just literally means hiring software engineers and a handful of data engineers and infrastructure engineers to solve that problem. The next phase, next half of the year, H2 of the year, we're going to be looking at really expanding our data team, expanding our data science team, and getting folks, smart folks that can really help take some of the models we've built to the next level. And I mentioned this earlier about the AI journey, right, and the data journey. It doesn't stop, right? So you don't build one model or one project and you're done with it. You're iterating and you're trying to get better at it. And so part of what we're going to do is build teams to help support our claim pricing initiative, so we can get better at that. Build teams to help support the intelligent automation initiative, so we can get better at that. And we're going to hire data scientists to support that initiative. And then lastly, build teams to support our eligibility and benefit verification initiative. And we're going to hire data scientists and a data team to support that initiative as well.
Amazing. Truly an exciting time for Gentem, and great things in store. Manny, we really appreciate you coming on today and talking to us about your background in detail. I appreciate you being so candid, giving us insight into Gentem, the mission, the future, and the many great career opportunities that there are going to be for people who are interested in this space. We thank you again for your time and wish you guys all the best on your journey.
Thanks a lot, and thanks for having me here.
AI in Action is brought to you by Aldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Aldus offer an exec search program. Aldus can help you discover how data science and AI can transform your company. With our unrivaled network of C-suite executives and senior AI professionals, we offer retained search services across the US and Europe. Get the Aldus advantage. Become a member of the Aldus community and enjoy some of the following: AI meetups. Once a month, our community gathers to listen to some of the leading experts in the world of data science and AI. Our speakers come from all over the world, including Dublin, Boston, and Frankfurt. We also have our AI mentors. Our experts will provide mentoring to Aldus members. And don't forget our AI in Action podcast. Each week we have guests from all over the world talking us through their education, career, and more. Become an Aldus member and get the Aldus advantage. For more information and to sign up for our newsletter, log on to www.aldus.com. That's www.aldus.com. Aldus International, empowering through AI.